After more than 6 decades in the spotlight, Hayley Mills has finally broken her silence about one of the most powerful women she ever met, Hollywood icon Maureen O'Hara. For years, fans of The Parent Trap wondered what really happened behind the scenes between the young British prodigy and the fiery Irish legend who played her on-screen mother. Were they close friends, quiet rivals, or something far deeper? Now, at 79, Hayley has revealed the truth. And what she said about Maureen O'Hara left fans stunned. This isn't just another Hollywood story. It's a story about mentorship, resilience, and the quiet strength of women who dared to stand tall when the world expected them to bow. Hayley Mills was born into a world of spotlights. Her father, Sir John Mills, was one of Britain's most respected actors, and her mother, Mary Hayley Bell, was an accomplished playwright and novelist. In their home, creativity wasn't just encouraged, it was the language of everyday life. Scripts lay across the dinner table, rehearsals echoed through the halls, and imagination seemed as normal as breathing. By the age of 12, Hayley had already followed that family rhythm onto a movie set. Her debut in Tiger Bay proved she was more than just a famous name's daughter. Audiences saw honesty in her eyes and a kind of sincerity you can't fake. Among the people who noticed was Walt Disney himself. Disney saw what others hadn't, a spark of innocence that could light up an entire screen. He called her a rare light in a cynical world. Soon she was whisked to Hollywood to star in Pollyanna, and overnight she became the face of optimism. The film earned her an Academy Juvenile Award and made her a global sweetheart. But the crown of Disney's Golden Girl came with its own weight. By 15, Hayley's smile was everywhere, yet behind that smile was a girl quietly wondering who she really was. The world adored Pollyanna, the cheerful, endlessly hopeful child, but Hayley herself was growing up. She was forming her own ideas, her own boundaries, her own voice. And that inner search would take a new turn the day she walked onto the set of The Parent Trap. That's where she met Maureen O'Hara. To Hollywood, O'Hara was already royalty, bold, beautiful, and unshakably proud. With her blazing red hair and commanding presence, she wasn't just another star. She was a force of nature. She'd faced down directors, argued with producers, and earned respect in an industry that rarely respected women. For 14-year-old Hayley, meeting her was like stepping in front of a hurricane of confidence. I was terribly shy at that age, and there was Maureen, magnificent, confident, with a voice that filled the room. At first, she was intimidated. Maureen carried herself with such authority that even grown men hesitated before speaking to her. But soon, that fear turned into fascination. Between takes, O'Hara would tell stories about Ireland, about rough weather, long filming days with John Wayne, and the endless fight to be taken seriously in Hollywood. She'd laugh, tease the crew, and light up the entire set. The same woman who looked fierce on screen could melt everyone's tension with a single joke. That contrast captivated young Hayley. One afternoon, during a quiet break in filming, O'Hara turned to her and said something that would stay with Hayley forever. "You have to know who you are before the world tells you who to be." At 14, she didn't quite understand it, but that line would echo through every chapter of her life. O'Hara's lessons weren't lectures, they were moments. How she stood tall when men interrupted her, how she spoke her mind without apology, how she demanded excellence from everyone, including herself. She expected the best because she gave the best, and Hayley noticed. She later said, "Maureen wasn't cruel or unkind. She just didn't believe in half measures. Watching her work was like watching a masterclass in precision. Every glance, every gesture had purpose. Maureen showed that being feminine didn't mean being fragile. And that realization quietly changed the way she saw herself. Behind the glamour, O'Hara was also fighting battles no one saw. In the male-dominated studio system of the 1950s and 60s, she constantly had to prove her worth. Many mistook her confidence for arrogance, but it was survival. She demanded respect in rooms that weren't built to give it. And in that strength, Hayley found inspiration. Years later, when her own life became tabloid gossip, she remembered Maureen's calm defiance, how grace could coexist with power. It wasn't about shouting louder than anyone else. It was about never lowering your voice when you were right. As the 60s moved on, Hayley's career soared, but her personal life began to take center stage. During the filming of The Family Way in 1966, she met director Roy Bolting, a man 33 years older. He was experienced, charming, and fascinated by her. Their connection was instant, and soon the young actress and the seasoned filmmaker became inseparable. When the news broke, it shocked everyone. To the public, she was still Disney's innocent child star. To see her with a man old enough to be her father was scandalous. Headlines screamed, critics scolded, but Hayley stayed quiet. She didn't owe explanations to strangers. Instead, she focused on her work and the man she loved. They married in 1971, built a life between London's Chelsea district and a countryside home in Buckinghamshire, and welcomed a son, Crispium. To outsiders, it looked idyllic. Windmill home, quiet life, famous friends. But over time, the age difference and conflicting ambitions eroded their bond. By 1977, the marriage ended. Heartbreak, though painful, became another teacher. And through it all, Hayley carried the voice of Maureen O'Hara in her head. Know who you are. That strength allowed her to move forward without bitterness. She found love again, first with actor Lee Lawson, with whom she had another son, and later with actor-writer Firdos Bomji, who was 20 years her junior. This time she didn't care about judgment or gossip. She chose happiness on her own terms, exactly the way Maureen would have wanted her to. As the years went on, Hayley gradually stepped away from the Hollywood spotlight. Unlike many child stars who vanished or fell apart, she reinvented herself. Theater became her new home, intimate, challenging, real. She appeared in dramas, television films, and stage productions that allowed her to stretch as an artist rather than chase fame. In 2000, Disney honored her with the Disney Legends Award, acknowledging not just her roles, but her legacy. It was a full-circle moment. The studio that had once defined her childhood now celebrated the woman she'd become. But behind the applause, she still thought about Maureen. The memory of that woman, fiery, funny, unyielding, was never far from her mind. Every time Hayley faced a tough decision, she'd think back to those long filming days, that Irish laugh, and those words of wisdom. When Maureen O'Hara passed away in 2015, Hayley felt a loss deeper than she expected. She said, "It was like losing a piece of old Hollywood, the kind of grace and strength that doesn't exist anymore." She began speaking publicly about their bond for the first time. Fans who thought the two were simply co-stars were surprised to hear how close they really were. Maureen had been more than a mentor. She had been a protector. Hayley remembered how Maureen would sense her nerves before a scene and quietly place a reassuring hand on her shoulder. She'd look at me and say, "You've got this, darling." Those small gestures became her anchor. Maureen wasn't for gossip or small talk. She valued privacy, integrity, and professionalism. But she also had a wicked human sense of humor. Hayley recalled her telling stories from her adventures with John Wayne, tales of wild landscapes, stubborn directors, and practical jokes that left the crew in tears of laughter. For all her fierceness, O'Hara had warmth. And Hayley never forgot that balance, how you could be strong without being harsh, brave without being loud. She showed me that kindness isn't weakness, and that dignity is something no one can take from you. Looking back now, Hayley realizes how rare that mentorship truly was. Hollywood is full of fleeting friendships and surface-level admiration, but Maureen offered something genuine. She taught by example, through presence, through consistency, and she never asked for recognition in return. That quiet mentorship shaped Hayley more than any director, producer, or critic ever could. Because Maureen didn't just teach her how to act, she taught her how to be. Years later, when Hayley watches The Parent Trap, she doesn't just see her younger self. She sees the woman who stood beside her, teaching her lessons she'd only understand decades later. "The way she'd look at me before a take," Hayley said softly, "that's what I remember most. She'd smile, and suddenly I wasn't scared anymore." Now, at 79, Hayley Mills has lived enough life to appreciate what those moments truly meant. She's seen the rise and fall of fame, the cruelty of tabloids, the beauty of rediscovering herself beyond the camera. And through it all, the memory of Maureen O'Hara remains a guiding light. When asked recently who influenced her most, Hayley didn't mention Walt Disney or her famous father. She mentioned Maureen, because Maureen represented something bigger than Hollywood. She represented courage, the kind that doesn't need applause, the kind that survives criticism, time, and fading spotlight. "It took me decades to understand what she meant," Hayley confessed, "but now I do. You really have to know who you are before the world tells you who to be." And after all these years, Hayley does. She's found peace, purpose, and a voice entirely her own. In many ways, she's become what Maureen once was to her, a mentor, a protector, a quiet source of strength for the next generation of artists. The truth Hayley finally told at 79 wasn't scandalous or dramatic. It was something much deeper. It was gratitude. Gratitude for a friendship that shaped her, for lessons that outlived the cameras, and for a woman who proved that integrity never goes out of style. Because sometimes the greatest stories in Hollywood aren't the ones written in scripts. They're the ones lived quietly, in the spaces between takes, in the shared laughter, in the gentle advice passed from one woman to another. Hayley Mills and Maureen O'Hara didn't just make a beloved family film. They built a legacy of strength and authenticity that still inspires. When you watch The Parent Trap today, you see more than a mother and daughter. You see two generations of women, one teaching, one learning, both changing each other forever. As Hayley once said, "She wasn't just my co-star. She was my mentor, my protector, and my friend." And maybe that's the real magic of their story. Two lives intertwined by art, bound by respect, and remembered not for the fame they gained, but for the strength they shared. Because in the end, the brightest lights in Hollywood aren't always the ones on the screen. Sometimes, they're the people who quietly teach others how to shine.